Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to be looking at the Merlin, which is a, well, fairly recent mech, all things considered, even though it isn't the most fancy machine out there. It was, however, when it first came out. It's a bit of an odd story that we're going to go through here. I am a little bit late on recording this compared to normal. Some people who are used to this channel would know that I generally drop the videos for people who are subscribed to the channel, while the general public get it at steady interval on usually Terran Mondays and Terran Fridays. For other people, as soon as the video is ready, it gets deployed. But in this case, there were a few different things going on, one of which was, well, I didn't get a whole lot of pictures of Merlin. They're not super common in my neck of the woods, and they're not super common, period. Those two here I got fairly early. But thankfully, one of my good friends dropped off a few of those recently. One of my good T-Fox affiliated, but not quite affiliated friend. Nice little lady in the periphery that generally sells me good things at a decent price. I've also got some issues with a laser reflective printer. Issues with mechanics causing some damage to the device. So I'm just later than usual in posting this video. But now let's look at the Merlin together, shall we? We know the history of the Merlin fairly well due to the series called Seal the Deal, which is a video/Tridio series that came out around the clan invasion from the Outworld news organization. They generally do the more serious shows, but this one here was really a dramatization of the old operation with Mountain Wolf's Battletech. We follow Michael O'Leary, played by Jamie De Niro, and his son Brandon O'Leary, played by Ashton Renner, as the CEO and son of CEO of the Mountain Wolf Battletech, their internal struggles, all sorts of fun little things. The acting is pretty good, the sets and practical effect are great. I'm not quite sure how romanticized the whole thing is compared to real life. I have some doubts that some things happen as they were written in the book, but you know, it's usually good enough for people who just want something to read or something to watch. The Merlin has the merit for being one of the first new battle mechs designed to enter production in close to 100 years. During the Third Succession War, people didn't bring new things into production. They kept producing what they could and repaired what they had on hand. For the periphery, though, this is more like the first in close to 300 years, as machines coming out of the Outworld Alliance rather than any of the major inner power was a little bit weird. The company that made them, Mountain Wolf Battletech, had been on down on their luck because the two machines that they could build, that they had the IP and copyrights for, the Nighthawk and the Sling, basically could not be built with the technology that was available at the time because they required all sorts of things that the Star League had, but the Succession powers didn't. When they put the Merlin into production, they went with something much simpler and something that was actually going to work and be able to be produced just about everywhere, even though it's really the Outworld Alliance that ended up building them. Really, the Merlin is a mech that best represents the era in which it came out, which is the very tail end of the Third Succession War. It was simple, it was rugged, it was easy to work on for technician, it only used basic parts and easy to acquire weapons and components. Nothing in there is proprietary, nothing in there is weird. And generally, even if you have a Merlin at the complete other end of the inner sphere or even in the periphery, you're going to be able to fix it because there's nothing on there that you can't finagle your way around. It was not meant to outfight and outrun most of the other heavy mechs, but it could do just about everything well enough that officers could slot them in just about every formation, which was good enough for most of the powers at the time. I mean, when building heavy mechs was pretty darn rare, like it was at the end of the Third Succession War, a new machine that was able to do all of those things was usually more than enough. It wasn't terribly fast, but it had jump jets, so it was decently mobile. It could take out infantry, it could brawl with other mechs, it could provide some sort of fire support. I mean, it's not the best in any of these categories, but it's definitely not the worst in any of these categories either. While most major power did shun the Merlin, the most mercenary outfits jumped on the opportunity to get a brand new heavy mech for less than 5 million C-bills. Even with shipping and preparation and everything, you generally got one around 6 million C-bills on most worlds where you would be waiting for contracts or getting your machines repaired. House Avellar of the Outworlds Alliance bought one for Rowan Avellar in 3029, which led to the machine being adopted more universally by the Alliance military corps. Even though it was a smaller military outfit, it was a great boon for Mountain Wolf. Other minor houses throughout the Inner Sphere also acquired the Merlin because it was readily available, and it was a mech that you could give to a dispossessed member of your family, just to give them a mech to be able to still serve either the greater houses or just protect your home. A very good little revenue generator in the end. Mountain Wolf Battle Mechs was happy to build the Merlin, and they expanded their facilities, even licensing the design to other minor companies throughout the greater sphere, but mainly in the Outworlds Alliance. Lushan Industry was another major supplier for the Merlin, and they provided a variety of upgrade kits, often called the Merlin Bravo, by the people using them, which generally feature minor chassis modification, armor upgrades, and the use of combined source weaponries rather than more general use one. The only other major power building the Merlin was Vanderberg Mechanized Industry, Indotori and Concordat, and they licensed the design in order to build some for local powers. The Outworlds Alliance is kind of under new management for a little while here, with Clan Snow Raven basically having moved there after being run out of the Clan Homeworlds. Mountain Wolf Battle Mechs were lucky to get a bunch of military grants from the Snow Raven Toman, so they allowed themselves to grow their industrial base that way and get new mechs built for that. Recently, you can start seeing new Merlin with the C configuration on them, completely clan-based. They're pretty decent, and we'll talk about them in a little bit, but just remember that most of the time you will see a standard Inner Sphere Merlin out there. The basic Merlin MLN-1A came out in 3010. It was very basic nowadays, but at the end of the Third Succession War, it was, well, top of the line. It used a Pitman 240 engine, fairly common, not one of the most common out there, but decently common enough that you'll be able to find parts fairly quickly, with 18 heat sinks, which is fairly big for a mech this size. You got a top speed of 64 kilometers per hour, which lets you walk around with other heavy mechs, generally your Warhammers, your Marauders, but also your Centurion, your Enforcers, your Vindicators, all those mechs that were extremely common at the time and used as standard troopers. You had a full set of jump jets, giving you 120 meters of jump range, which is pretty darn good, and the standard chassis is covered with 10.5 tons of standard plates, which is perfectly reasonable for a mech of this era. Honestly, it's nothing super fancy, but once again, it does the job just right. The main gun on the Merlin is a very common Magna L-Star PPC, which was only really rare in the Free Worlds League at the time because they just stuck too many of them on awesomes. To back this up at closer range, each arm mounts a Martel medium laser, which gives you decent damage, decent range, and is very, very easy to acquire and replace. Against infantry, you get both a good old Browning machine gun. I mean, those things have been in production since the early 20th century, or maybe even before that, and a flamer, reminding you that infantry was a major threat at time of development of that machine. Most Merlins also mounted a Hawley 5-rack of LRM for long-range support, but you'll see a decent number of them with a field refit, replacing the 5-rack with a 4 tubes of Hawley SRM instead, using the same guidance system, the same everything. It's a very easy swap to do. You have to pop it out and pop the new one back in. A lot of people have done that over the years. The first upgrade kit for the Merlin, outside of swapping the missile launcher, was the MLN-1B that came out in 3053, sometimes called Upgrade Kit Bravo. Rather than capitalizing on new technologies being available at the time, Mountain Wolf Battle Mechs kept things simple with basic Succession War technology. They probably didn't want a repeat of the Sling and Nighthawk situation, so they kept things easy. The only real big change here is the removal of the machine gun, using the Flamer as your primary anti-infantry weapon, and its accompanying ammo to add extra heat sinks. It's not a fantastic upgrade, and you're not going to see a whole lot of those walking around. You could tell that people were not super happy with this, and you quickly add the Bravo coming out with some interesting tweaks. Primarily now, the body is made of 10 ton of ferrofibrous plates, giving you more or less the same protection, but you're actually better protected because the LRM ammo is now in a case bin. The other major change is the replacement of the Magna L-Star PPC with a combine-sourced Lord's Light 2 ER PPC, probably taken off the production lines of, well, either the Grand Dragon or of the smaller Panther. Lord's Light 2 are extremely common. They're harder to work with than the Magna L-Star, but it's still a decent enough weapon. Lushan Industry was building parts for the Merlin in the Outworlds Alliance and decided to put their own spin on the design in 3068. The Merlin 1C Charlie is a simple weapon swap once again, where the medium lasers from the 1A or 1B are replaced with ER medium lasers. Of course, you have a Charlie Bravo version of this with the ferrofibrous skin, the case, and the ER medium lasers, and the PPC generally being replaced with a Lord's Light 2 ER PPC. This means that this thing is going to run crazy hot even with 19 regular heat sinks. You do have to be a little bit more careful when shooting everything with that one, but it's still a pretty decent design. The MLN-1D came out in 3090 and uses far more advanced technology than all previous designs. The heat sinks are replaced with 13 double strength ones, so you get better heat dissipation overall, even though you've got less heat sinks. And the saved weight go into a variety of things, mainly the arms now mounting light PPCs rather than medium lasers. You get the same kind of destructive power, you got a lot better range, and it shares the regular PPC's range, so you can basically brawl at that medium range or snipe a little bit. You're not going to be a match for any clan machine or anything that's super fancy from any of the major houses, but in many fights, it's going to be quite competent. The machine gun from the original is replaced with a 15mm heavy machine gun instead, so you're going to be very deadly to infantry, but you're going to have a little bit less range. It's a decent trade-off. Most of the time, you're going to be using this as a backup anyways. And of course, there is a Delta Bravo. It's not something very surprising outside the fact that the Magna L-Star is once again replaced with the Lord's Light 2 ER PPC, but it's going to run you a little bit cooler since, you've got more heat sinks. The armor is swapped with 10 tons of ferrofibrous plate. You've got a case 2 to protect the ammo instead, which is quite nice. And Lushan's Delta Charlie, the other version of this, replaces the light PPCs with a medium pulse laser and an ER medium laser instead. So you've got a few different options with that Delta, and you might be careful looking at what you're buying. And we've got another upgrade kit from that with the Echo version MLN-1E. You take out the heavy machine gun altogether, and you replace the 5 rack of LRM with a 5-tube rack of MML with 2 tons of reload in a case bin. Case 2, actually. So if it blows, it goes backwards rather than just blowing you up. It's going to even give you very nice utility. It's a nice weapon for that, and some decent punch at shorter range. This is a very nice thing to have more flexibility on a Merlin, which is already a very flexible machine. You, of course, have the Echo Bravo that's available with ferrofibrous plates, 10.5 tons of it, and that Lord's Light ER PPC. If you go with that particular model, it's probably my favorite of all those base Merlin. There's also the MLN-1P, not nicknamed Papa in this case, but Pedro, likely because of who piloted it the first time. The armor is now made of 8.5 tons of heavy ferrofibers, giving you about the same coverage as the original, but taking up a whole lot of room inside. It's a little bit clunky. You get 13 double heat sinks to keep variable pulse lasers cool in this particular setup. You've got a large variable speed pulse laser replacing the PPC, and each arm mounts a medium variable pulse. Remember, those have better damage potential at shorter range than longer range, and they're not wonderful in terms of range. Generally, I'd like those when you have a C3 computer set up, because they take advantage of that a whole lot. You do keep the flamer against the infantry, while the 5 rack of LRM is still there as a backup. It's a bit of a odd duck, but I think it does work fine. And finally, with Clan Snow Raven hiding out in the remnants of the Outworlds Alliance, you've got the Raven Alliance and Mountain Wolf building them the Merlin Sea. This one is quite fancy with 18 clan double heat sinks, which might be a little bit much, but that's what they went with. And you got that big clan ERPPC as a main gun, giving you quite a bit of punch, and a pair of improved heavy-medium lasers in the arms, which give you a whole lot of punch once again. You do lose a little bit on the range, which means that this is basically your big Merlin, just with a bit longer range with the ERPPC and a whole lot more punch at short range. You got a large caliber heavy machine gun as well, and your flamer to fight off the infantry, and the 5-rack of LRM is now upgraded to streak technology, which is odd. I'm not a huge fan of that streak LRM5 that the clanners have put on some machines. I'd rather they have just put a larger LRM10 in a way. The armor is now 12 tons of ferro-lamellar, making this thing an incredibly hard nut to crack, and it's going to be able to fight quite a few different things. Finally, the Merlin is not the most common machine out there, but it's been doing its rounds, especially in mercenary outfits. Nobody is heavily invested in the machine outside the Outwards Alliance, which means you will see mercenary units with them and such, but not much else. Maybe a little bit in the Taurian Concordat because of Vanderberg. Maybe the clan version will move things a little bit differently. Maybe it'll have greater acceptance in that new Star League of them. But who really knows in the end? It's one of those things that we'll have to wait and see. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.